tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Heath Barnes stood at the edge of the forward operating base, watching the Afghan sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. 15 years of marriage felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 8 months since his deployment began. The wedding photo in his vest pocket was creased from handling, showing a younger version of himself beside Tanya Barnes, her auburn hair catching the churchlight. Their twins, Emma and Justin, barely 3 years old at the time, now 15 and questioning everything. Heath had built his life like he built his military career, methodically, with purpose and absolute loyalty to those who earned it. The son of a steel worker from Pittsburgh, he'd enlisted at 18, worked his way up to Master Sergeant, specialized in intelligence operations. His mind was wired for strategy, for seeing 3 moves ahead, for understanding that information was the most powerful weapon in any arsenal. Tanya had been different when they met. A nursing student with ambitious dreams and a laugh that could light up a room. She'd said she loved his intensity, his dedication. "You're my rock, Heath," she'd whispered during those early years when money was tight and the future uncertain. They'd built something together. A house in suburbia, careers that mattered, children who were their pride. But somewhere along the way, the foundation had begun to crack. Heath noticed it in the months before deployment. The way Tanya's eyes would drift during conversations, how she'd grown distant when he talked about re-enlisting for another tour. She'd started working late more often, claiming the hospital needed extra coverage. Her phone had gained a password. Small things. But Heath Barnes didn't survive 15 years in military intelligence by ignoring small things. "Barnes," Sergeant Wiley Cooper's voice cut through the morning air. "Command wants to see you." Heath tucked the photo away and headed toward the command tent. Cooper had been his closest friend since basic training, a man who understood that brotherhood meant having each other's backs no matter what. They'd saved each other's lives more times than either cared to count, but more importantly, they'd saved each other's sanity. The debriefing was routine. Intelligence reports, tactical assessments, the endless bureaucracy of modern warfare. But Heath's mind kept drifting to the email he'd received that morning. Tanya had written about the twins' school activities, neighborhood gossip, her work schedule, all surface-level chatter that said nothing while filling paragraphs. It was the email of someone with secrets. After the briefing, Cooper pulled him aside. "You've been off lately, brother. What's eating at you?" Heath studied his friend's weathered face. Cooper wasn't just a soldier. He was a man who'd built a network of contacts across 3 continents. Someone who could make things happen or disappear with equal efficiency. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong at home. Women get lonely during deployments. It's natural. Not Tanya." Heath's voice carried absolute certainty. "She's too proud, too strong. If she was just lonely, she'd tell me. This is something else." Cooper nodded slowly. "In her line of work, instincts kept you alive. What do you need?" "Information." But quietly. "I could be wrong, and if I am..." Heath let the sentence hang. "And if you're right?" Heath's expression hardened, revealing the man who'd earned respect through competence and fear through necessity. Then someone's about to learn why crossing Heath Barnes is the worst mistake they'll ever make. That evening, Heath sat in his quarters writing a letter to his children. The twins were sophomores now, old enough to understand that the world wasn't always fair, but young enough to still believe in heroes. He wrote about duty, about honor, about the importance of keeping your word even when others didn't. He wrote about consequences. 3 days later, Cooper returned with a file that changed everything. Chapter 2. The Betrayal. Tanya Barnes stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the necklace Kurt Russell had given her the week before. The emerald pendant caught the light, and for a moment, she felt beautiful again. Not like the wife of a soldier who'd been gone for 8 months, not like the mother of teenagers who barely acknowledged her existence, but like a woman desired for who she was. Kurt's hands slipped around her waist from behind, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. "You sure about tonight? We could just stay in." She leaned back against his chest, inhaling his cologne, something expensive and sophisticated that Heath would never think to wear. "Emma's at soccer practice until 9. Justin's at his friend's house. We have time. Kurt Russell was everything Heath wasn't. Spontaneous where Heath was methodical, charming where Heath was intense, present where Heath was deployed. A successful real estate developer with silver at his temples and a smile that made women forget their problems. He'd swept into Tanya's life 6 months ago when she'd been at her lowest point, feeling abandoned and forgotten. "I still can't believe you're married to a soldier," Kurt murmured, pressing his lips to her neck. "You're too vibrant to be a military wife, living your life around someone else's schedule." Tanya had heard variations of this speech before, and each time it reinforced what she'd already begun to believe, that Heath had never truly seen her, never appreciated what he had. 15 years of marriage, and what did she have to show for it? A husband who chose duty over family, children who were growing up without a father figure, and a life that felt increasingly hollow. "He wasn't always like this," she said, though the defense felt automatic now. "When we were younger, he was different, more present." "People change," Kurt said, spinning her around to face him. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The affair had started innocently enough. Kurt had been helping her refinance the house, something Heath should have been there to handle, and their professional relationship had gradually become personal. Coffee meetings that stretched into lunch, lunch meetings that became dinners, dinners that became something Tanya hadn't felt in years, appreciated. Kurt made her feel like the most important person in the room. He remembered details about her dreams, asked about her nursing career, listened when she talked about feeling trapped in a life that no longer fit. He didn't speak in military jargon or discuss deployment schedules. He spoke about art, travel, possibilities. "I've been thinking," Kurt said, leading her to the bed that she'd shared with Heath for 10 years. "About us. About what comes next." Tanya's pulse quickened. They'd danced around this conversation for weeks, both knowing that what they had couldn't remain hidden forever. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want more than stolen moments. I want you, Tanya. Really want you. All of you." She searched his face, seeing something she'd craved for so long. Certainty. Heath lived in shades of gray, in contingency plans and tactical considerations. Kurt offered something simpler and infinitely more appealing. A choice. "He'll never give me a divorce easily," she said. "Heath doesn't lose. It's not in his nature." Kurt's expression grew serious. "Then we make it easy for him. File first, catch him off guard. My lawyer says deployment can be considered abandonment if we frame it right, especially with his history of choosing military commitments over family." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Merlin Bailey, Kurt's lawyer, had outlined a strategy that would paint Heath as an absent father who prioritized his career over his children's well-being. The deployment was just the latest example of a pattern that stretched back years. With the right documentation, the right testimony, they could build a case for sole custody that would be difficult to challenge from overseas. "The children will adjust," Kurt said firmly. "Kids are resilient, and they'll be better off with stability, with a father figure who's actually here." Tanya wanted to believe him. The alternative, continuing to live half a life while waiting for a husband who might never truly come home, felt unbearable. She thought about Emma's last school play, where she'd scanned the audience for Heath's face and found only an empty seat. She thought about Justin's birthday, when Heath had called for 10 minutes between missions, his voice distracted and distant. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow. Bailey says timing is everything. If we file while he's deployed, it reinforces the abandonment narrative." That night, after Kurt left and the children were asleep, Tanya sat at her computer composing the email that would end her marriage. She wrote about the necessity of moving forward, about doing what was best for the children, about decisions that couldn't wait for his return. She wrote with the conviction of someone who'd already crossed a line and found the other side more comfortable than expected. She clicked send without reading it twice. 3,000 miles away, Heath Barnes read the message in his quarters, his expression never changing. Then he walked across the base to find Wiley Cooper, carrying the file his friend had prepared, a file that contained photographs, financial records, and a timeline that painted a very different picture of Tanya's last 6 months. "Understood," Heath had written back, his fingers steady on the keyboard. It was the last word his wife would receive from him directly. Chapter 3. The Response. The secure satellite phone in Heath quarters buzzed at 0347 hours. He'd been awake for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling and calculating. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and familiar. Sergeant Barnes? This is Merlin Bailey, attorney at law, representing your wife in... I know who you are, Heath interrupted, his voice carrying the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The question is, do you know who I am? There was a pause. In that silence, Heath could hear the exact moment Bailey realized he'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Sir, I think there may have been some miscommunication regarding... No miscommunication, counselor. Your client filed for divorce and sole custody of my children. You're claiming my deployment constitutes abandonment. That's not miscommunication. That's war. Heath had spent the previous 72 hours doing what he did best, gathering intelligence and formulating strategy. The file Cooper had assembled was comprehensive, but it was only the beginning. Heath Barnes didn't just react to threats. He eliminated them with surgical precision. Mr. Barnes, if we could just discuss this reasonably. Reasonable ended when you decided to use my service to this country as ammunition against me. Reasonable ended when you thought you could separate me from my children while I'm defending the very freedom that allows you to practice law. Heath's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm coming home, Bailey. And when I do, you're going to discover exactly why people who cross me don't get second chances. The line went dead. Bailey stared at his phone, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning in his downtown office. He'd handled hundreds of divorce cases, dealt with angry spouses, military personnel, custody battles. But something in Heath Barnes' voice suggested this wasn't going to be a standard proceeding. Within an hour, Bailey was researching his opponent. What he found made his blood run cold. Master Sergeant Heath Barnes wasn't just any deployed soldier. He was a 15-year veteran of military intelligence with 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and classified assignments across Eastern Europe. His record was exemplary, his commendations extensive, and his security clearance high enough to make Bailey's lawyer brain start calculating potential lawsuits for defamation of character. But it was the personal details that truly worried him. Heath Barnes had grown up in a rough neighborhood, earned his way into the military through determination and ruthlessness. He'd built his career on understanding enemies, exploiting weaknesses, and never backing down from a fight. The man Bailey was facing across a legal battlefield wasn't just a soldier. He was a strategist with the resources and connections to make problems disappear. Bailey picked up his phone and dialed Tanya Barnes. "How's everything going?" she asked, her voice bright with anticipation. "We need to talk. In person. Now. What's wrong? He can't fight this from overseas, can he?" "You said." "I said a lot of things before I knew who your husband was," Bailey interrupted. "Meet me in my office in 1 hour. And bring Kurt Russell with you." When they arrived, Bailey's office felt smaller than usual. Tanya sat rigidly in her chair, while Kurt paced behind her, his usual confidence replaced by obvious anxiety. "What exactly did you tell me about your husband's military service?" Bailey asked. "That he's deployed, that he chooses the military over his family, that... Did you tell me he was military intelligence? Did you mention his security clearance? His commendations? The fact that he spent 15 years building relationships with people who can make or break careers?" Tanya's face paled. "Does it matter? He's still gone. He's still choosing duty over family." Bailey opened his laptop and turned it toward them. Heath Barnes' service record filled the screen. The parts that weren't classified. Anyway, your husband isn't just deployed, Mrs. Barnes. He's a decorated veteran with an exemplary record who's currently serving his country in active combat. Any judge is going to see our abandonment claim as not just frivolous, but disrespectful. Kurt leaned forward, his jaw tight. So we adjust the strategy. Every marriage has problems. We focus on irreconcilable differences, split custody. "You don't understand," Bailey said. "This isn't about legal strategy anymore. Your husband knows about the affair." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tanya's hand flew to her throat, fingers finding the emerald necklace Kurt had given her. How could he know? He's been gone for 8 months. Military intelligence, Bailey said grimly. These people have resources we can't even imagine. And based on our conversation this morning, he's not just informed, he's planning something. Kurt's face flushed red. Let him plan. He's 3,000 miles away, playing soldier, while I'm here taking care of his wife and children. What's he going to do? Send me a strongly worded letter. Bailey studied Kurt Russell with the expression of a man watching someone walk into traffic. Mr. Russell, in my professional opinion, you should be very, very careful. Men like Heath Barnes don't make empty threats. Men like Heath Barnes don't scare me, Kurt replied, but his voice lacked conviction. What none of them knew was that Heath Barnes was already en route home. Emergency leave had been arranged through channels Bailey couldn't access, using connections he couldn't imagine. While they sat in the lawyer's office debating strategy, Heath was 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, reviewing intelligence reports and making his own plans. The hunter was coming home, and the prey had no idea what was waiting for them. Chapter 4. The Hunter Returns. Heath Barnes stepped off the plane at Denver International Airport wearing civilian clothes that couldn't hide the predatory stillness in his movements. He'd lost weight during deployment, his face leaner and harder, his eyes carrying the flat assessment of someone who'd spent months evaluating threats and eliminating them. Wiley Cooper waited in the terminal, holding a duffel bag and wearing the expression of a man about to hand someone a loaded weapon. "Welcome home, brother." They embraced briefly. The efficient contact of soldiers who understood that sentiment was a luxury they couldn't afford. "Status report," Heath said. "Everything you need is in the bag. Documentation, surveillance photos, financial records, communications intercepts." Cooper's voice was neutral, professional. "Your wife has been busy." They walked through the terminal in silence. Two men who'd learned that words were less reliable than actions. Outside, Cooper's truck waited in the short-term parking garage. As they drove toward the city, Cooper briefed Heath with military precision. Tanya Barnes and Kurt Russell have been conducting their affair for approximately 6 months. They've been careless. Public restaurants, her house when the children are at school, his condo downtown. Russell's been positioning himself as a father figure to Emma and Justin, attending school events, helping with homework. Heath's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The children's reaction? Mixed. Emma seems resistant. She's loyal to you. Justin's more receptive, probably because he's angry about the deployment. Russell's been smart about it, playing the fun uncle role rather than trying to replace you directly. Financial situation? Russell's been paying for dinners, gifts, small things. But there's more. Cooper handed Heath a tablet containing bank records. Tanya opened a separate checking account 3 weeks ago. She's been moving money systematically, small amounts but consistent. Heath studied the numbers with the focus he'd once applied to enemy troop movements. She's planning to disappear. That's my assessment. Russell's got property in Colorado Springs, a cabin in Aspen, connections in California. The divorce filing was just the opening move. They pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript office building. "Where are we?" "Safe House." Douglas Schaefer runs a private security firm. All former military, all people who owe you favors. We've got surveillance equipment, communication intercepts, and most importantly, we've got legal cover for everything we're about to do. Heath followed Cooper inside, noting the professional setup. Multiple computer screens, sophisticated surveillance equipment, and 3 men he recognized from various deployments. These weren't just soldiers. They were specialists in information warfare, psychological operations, and strategic planning. Douglas Schaefer stood as they entered, his presence commanding despite his civilian attire. "Sergeant Barnes, I've reviewed your situation. My assessment is that you're dealing with people who've fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the conflict they've initiated. Meaning, they think this is a divorce proceeding. You understand it's a war." Schaefer gestured to the wall of monitors displaying surveillance footage, financial records, and communication logs. "We've been preparing accordingly." For the next 4 hours, Heath absorbed intelligence that painted a complete picture of his wife's betrayal. The affair wasn't just physical, it was strategic. Russell had been systematically inserting himself into every aspect of Tanya's life, positioning himself as the stable alternative to Heath's military commitments. But more concerning were the communications they'd intercepted between Tanya and Kurt about the children. They weren't just planning to divorce Heath. They were planning to erase him entirely. Kurt had been researching boarding schools, private academies, places where the children could be isolated from Heath's influence. They're moving faster than anticipated, Schaefer reported. Russell's been pushing Tanya to relocate to California after the divorce is finalized. He's already put an offer on a house in San Diego. Heath set down the tablet, his expression unreadable. Timeline. Based on their communications, they expect the divorce to be finalized within 3 months. They're planning to relocate immediately afterward, claiming it's for Tanya's career opportunities. And my children would disappear into California's family court system, 3 states away from any meaningful contact with you. Heath stood and walked to the window overlooking the city where he'd built his life, where his children were growing up believing their father had abandoned them. Options. Cooper joined him at the window. We could go legal, hire better lawyers, fight the custody battle, expose the affair. Might work, might not. Depends on the judge, on how well Russell's positioned himself. Or, we remind them that crossing Heath Barnes has consequences. Heath turned back to the room, studying the faces of men who'd followed him into combat, who understood that some battles couldn't be won through conventional means. I want them to understand something very clearly. They've made the worst mistake of their lives. But I want them to reach that understanding slowly, completely, and with absolute certainty that there's no way back. Schaefer smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. What did you have in mind? Total warfare. But surgical. Precise. They want to play games with my family, my children, my life? Then they're going to learn exactly how those games end when played against someone who wrote the rulebook. Heath Barnes had spent 15 years learning how to destroy enemies without leaving fingerprints. Now he was going to apply those skills to protecting what mattered most. The war was about to begin. Chapter 5. The Trap Closes. Kurt Russell stared at his phone, reading the text message for the 3rd time. Your loan application has been declined. Please contact your loan officer immediately. The construction project in Denver, his largest development deal, the one that would secure his financial future, was supposed to be fully funded by now. He dialed his banker, fingers drumming impatiently on his mahogany desk. Michael, it's Kurt Russell. I just got a message about my loan application being declined. There must be some mistake. The pause on the other end stretched too long. Kurt, we need to talk. In person. There have been some complications with your credit profile. Complications? My credit score is pristine. I've been banking with you for 8 years. Can you come in this afternoon? 3 o'clock. Kurt ended the call, unease creeping up his spine. In the past week, small things have been going wrong. His usual lunch reservation at Enzo's had been mysteriously canceled. His golf club membership had encountered administrative delays in renewal. His cleaning lady had suddenly become unavailable. Individual incidents, each explainable. Together, they formed a pattern that made Kurt's throat tight. Meanwhile, across town, Tanya Barnes sat in Merlin Bailey's office, watching her lawyer pace behind his desk like a caged animal. The confident man who'd assured her of an easy victory had been replaced by someone who jumped at phone calls and kept checking the locks on his office door. The situation has become complex, Bailey said, not meeting her eyes. How complex? You said Heath couldn't fight this from overseas. That was before I understood who Heath Barnes actually is. Bailey pulled up a file on his computer. Do you know what your husband did in Eastern Europe? The classified assignments, the connections he's built? Tanya shook her head, feeling suddenly very young and very naive. Neither do I. And that's the problem. Men with his background, his clearance level, his network, they don't just disappear quietly when their families are threatened. Before Tanya could respond, Bailey's phone rang. He answered with visible reluctance. Yes? What do you mean suspended? I've been a member of the Colorado Bar Association for 15 years. What complaint? Who filed it? Tanya watched her lawyer's face drain of color as he listened. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. "What's happening?" she whispered. "Someone filed an ethics complaint against me. They're questioning my handling of your case, claiming I misrepresented facts to the court." Bailey's voice was hollow. "The complaint includes documentation I've never seen before. Evidence of your affair, financial records, communication logs. That's impossible. How could they have? I don't know. But whoever's doing this, they're not just targeting me. They're building a comprehensive case against both of us." At 3 o'clock, Kurt Russell sat across from his banker, watching 8 years of carefully built credit relationships crumble. Someone had provided the bank with information suggesting Kurt had misrepresented his assets, inflated his income, and concealed existing debts. "This is insane," Kurt protested. "Every document I've provided is legitimate." "Run the checks again." "We did. Multiple times." The banker slid a folder across the table. "According to this information, you've been operating under false pretenses for months. The IRS has been notified." Kurt's vision blurred. "The IRS? For what?" "Unreported income. Questionable business expenses. Someone provided them with very detailed records of cash transactions you've been making." The cash transactions. Kurt's stomach dropped as he realized what they were referring to. The gifts he'd been buying Tanya, the dinners, the small expenses he'd been handling off the books to avoid creating a paper trail of the affair. Someone had been watching. Someone had been documenting. Someone had turned his attempts at discretion into evidence of financial impropriety. That evening, Heath Barnes sat in a rented SUV across the street from his own house, watching Kurt Russell's BMW in his driveway. His children were inside. Emma, probably doing homework, Justin likely playing video games. Tanya was cooking dinner for another man in the kitchen where Heath had proposed to her 15 years ago. His phone buzzed with updates from the team. Kurt's financial empire was collapsing systematically. Bailey's law practice was under investigation. Tanya's new bank account had been flagged for suspicious activity. But Heath wasn't satisfied with financial pressure. This was personal. He dialed a number from memory. "Joey Golden? It's Heath Barnes." "Yeah, I know it's been a while. I need a favor." Joey Golden ran the most successful construction company in Denver, built on military contracts and veteran hiring. He also happened to be Kurt Russell's biggest competitor. "Remember that development project Russell's been working on? The one that's been cutting into your territory? Interesting. And if someone were to provide evidence that Russell's been using substandard materials, falsifying inspection reports, I thought you might be interested." Heath ended the call and dialed another number. "Landon Winters? Heath Barnes. I understand you work in social services now." "Yes, I have some concerns about the welfare of my children." One by one, Heath activated a network Kurt Russell and Tanya Barnes never knew existed. Military connections, business relationships, professional favors accumulated over 15 years of service. Each contact received carefully curated information, legally obtained documentation, legitimate concerns that required official investigation. Heath wasn't breaking laws. He was simply ensuring that existing laws were enforced with unusual efficiency. By the time Kurt Russell left Heath's house that night, his phone had been buzzing nonstop with crisis calls. His development project was under investigation for safety violations. His real estate license was being reviewed. His tax situation was being audited. And in a cruel twist that made Heath smile for the first time in weeks, Kurt's own lawyer was now recommending he seek separate representation, because continuing to work with Merlin Bailey might constitute a conflict of interest. The trap was closing, but Heath wasn't finished. Tomorrow, he would begin the final phase, making sure Kurt Russell and Tanya Barnes understood exactly what they had lost and what it would cost them. Chapter 6, Face to Face. Heath Barnes stood on his own front porch for the first time in 8 months, key in hand, listening to the sounds of his family inside. Emma's laugh carried from the living room, followed by Kurt Russell's voice telling some story that made her giggle again. The sound hit Heath like a physical blow, not because his daughter was happy, but because she was happy with a man who was systematically destroying her family. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Dad!" Emma's voice cracked with surprise and joy as she launched herself from the couch into his arms. For a moment, the months of betrayal and planning fell away, replaced by the simple weight of his daughter's embrace. Justin emerged from the kitchen more slowly, his 15-year-old frame caught between anger and relief. Mom said you weren't coming back until next month. Plans changed, Heath said, his eyes finding Kurt Russell frozen on his living room couch like an animal caught in headlights. Seems like there have been a lot of changes around here. Tanya appeared from the kitchen, her face cycling through shock, guilt, and desperate calculation. Heath, you didn't call. We weren't expecting. I noticed. Heath's voice carried the flat calm that had made enemy combatants surrender without firing a shot. His gaze moved deliberately between his wife and the man sitting on his furniture, eating dinner with his children, wearing cologne in his house. Kurt Russell stood slowly, attempting to salvage dignity from an impossible situation. Mr. Barnes, I'm Kurt Russell. I've been helping Tanya while you were deployed. Helping. Heath repeated the word like he was testing its weight. How exactly have you been helping, Mr. Russell? The question hung in the air while everyone calculated responses. Emma looked confused, sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Justin's expression was harder, more knowing. He'd figured out at least part of what was happening. Dad, Emma said, tugging on Heath's sleeve. Kurt's been taking me to soccer practice, and he helped Justin with his history project, and he fixed the washing machine when it broke. Each word was a knife twist, not because of what Kurt had done, but because Heath hadn't been there to do those things himself. This was the subtle cruelty of the affair, not just sexual betrayal, but the systematic replacement of Heath's role in his children's lives. That was thoughtful of him, Heath said, his tone giving nothing away. I'm sure Mr. Russell has been very invested in this family's well-being. Kurt's face flushed red. Look, Barnes, I know this is awkward, but... Awkward? Heath's eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Russell, my wife filed for divorce and sole custody while I was serving my country. She claimed my deployment constituted abandonment of my children. You've been playing house with my family in my absence, and you think this is awkward? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Emma stepped closer to Heath, suddenly afraid. Justin crossed his arms, watching the standoff with the intensity of someone learning how men handle crisis. Heath, Tanya said, her voice strained. We should talk privately. No. The word was absolute. We're done with private conversations. We're done with secrets. Your boyfriend and I are going to have a chat right here, in front of the children whose lives he's been planning to reorganize. Kurt straightened, trying to project authority he didn't possess. I won't be threatened in front of children. Heath smiled, a cold expression that made Kurt take an involuntary step backward. Mr. Russell, if I were threatening you, you'd know it. This is conversation. Adult conversation about adult consequences. Heath, please. Tanya stepped between them. Kurt didn't know about the divorce filing. I made that decision on my own. Is that true, Mr. Russell? You had no knowledge of the legal proceedings designed to separate me from my children? Kurt's jaw worked silently. He'd been caught in a lie, and everyone in the room knew it. I thought so. Heath turned to his children. Emma, Justin, go to your rooms. Your mother and Mr. Russell and I need to discuss some grown-up matters. But Dad, now. The authority in Heath's voice brooked no argument. His children obeyed because they recognized something in their father's tone that demanded respect. The voice of a man who'd commanded soldiers in combat, who'd made life-and-death decisions under pressure. Once they were alone, Heath walked to the mantel where family photos displayed 15 years of marriage, birthdays, holidays, milestones. He picked up their wedding photo, studying it like he was seeing it for the first time. Do you remember your vows, Tanya? For better or worse, in sickness and in health. I don't recall an exemption from military deployment. Things change, Heath. People change. You've been gone 8 months. I've been gone 8 months defending the freedom that allows your boyfriend to run his real estate business, your lawyer to practice law, and your children to sleep safely at night. He set down the photo and faced them both. And in 8 months, you decided to erase me from their lives. Kurt found his voice. You were never there anyway. Even before the deployment, you chose the military over family. Tanya deserves better. Heath nodded slowly. You're absolutely right, Mr. Russell. My wife deserves better. She deserves a husband who keeps his promises, who honors his commitments, who doesn't sneak around behind her back. His eyes moved to Tanya. Just like my children deserve a mother who doesn't lie to them about why their father isn't coming home. We were going to tell them. When? After you'd move them to California? After you'd enroll them in schools where I'd never find them? After you'd convinced them their father abandoned them? The color drained from Tanya's face. How did you know about California? About the house in San Diego? About the boarding schools you've been researching? Heath's smile was razor sharp. Tanya, I spent 15 years learning how to find people who don't want to be found. Did you really think you could hide from me? Kurt stepped forward, his face red with anger and fear. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Heath studied him with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. It means, Mr. Russell, that you've made a series of very poor decisions. And now you're going to live with the consequences. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. The next morning, Kurt Russell's phone rang at 5:47 a.m. Half asleep, he answered without checking the caller ID. Mr. Russell? This is Detective Sammy Thornton with Denver PD. We need you to come in for questioning regarding allegations of fraud and harassment. Kurt sat up in bed, instantly awake. What allegations? I haven't done anything. Sir, we've received documentation suggesting you've been engaging in stalking behavior, financial harassment, and potentially contributing to the delinquency of minors. Can you come in this morning? Kurt's mouth went dry. This is insane. Who filed these charges? We'll discuss everything when you come in. Can you be here by 9? After the detective hung up, Kurt's hand shook as he dialed Merlin Bailey's office. The call went straight to voicemail. Due to ongoing legal proceedings, this office is temporarily closed. If this is an emergency, please contact. Kurt threw his phone across the room. Meanwhile, Tanya sat in her car outside Emma's school, reading the letter that had been delivered to her workplace that morning. The hospital administrator wanted to meet with her immediately regarding concerns about professional conduct and potential violations of patient privacy. Her hands trembled as she read. Someone had reported that Tanya had been accessing patient records without authorization, using hospital computers for personal business, and taking excessive personal time during work hours. All technically true. She'd been researching divorce attorneys during breaks, using the hospital's internet to communicate with Kurt, and yes, she looked up Heath's medical records to see if there was anything she could use in the custody battle. Individual minor infractions that, when compiled and presented professionally, painted a picture of someone who couldn't be trusted with patient information. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check the mailbox at home. Tanya drove home with growing dread. In the mailbox, she found copies of financial documents she'd never seen before. Bank statements, credit reports, transaction records that showed every gift Kurt had given her, every dinner he'd paid for, every expense that could be interpreted as a married woman accepting financial support from a man who wasn't her husband. But it was the final document that made her legs weak. A psychological evaluation request from the family court, triggered by anonymous concerns about the children's welfare. Someone had reported that Emma and Justin were being exposed to an unstable home environment, that their mother was having an affair, that a non-relative male was having inappropriate influence over minor children. The evaluation would be thorough, invasive, and permanent part of the court record. Heath Barnes sat in his truck outside Kurt Russell's office building, watching chaos unfold through binoculars. Police cars, investigators, former employees leaving with boxes of personal items. Kurt's real estate empire was collapsing with surgical precision. Joey Golden's construction company had provided evidence of Kurt's substandard building practices. The IRS had found irregularities in his tax filings. The state licensing board was investigating complaints about his professional conduct. Each investigation was legitimate, triggered by real evidence, conducted by professionals doing their jobs. Heath's phone rang. Target acquired, came Wiley Cooper's voice. Status: Russell just left the police station. He's panicked, making calls, driving erratically. Should I maintain surveillance? Negative. Let him sweat. What about Tanya? She's at the hospital meeting with administrators. Preliminary reports suggest they're considering suspension pending investigation. Heath nodded with satisfaction. And the children? Emma's at school, unaware. Justin's asking questions. He's smart enough to know something's happening. Keep them protected. None of this touches them directly. Heath ended the call and drove to the elementary school, where he'd attended parent-teacher conferences, watched Christmas plays, cheered at field days. The principal, Mrs. Clarissa Dixon, had known Heath for 10 years, had seen him juggle military duty with fatherhood, had witnessed his dedication to his children's education. "Mr. Barnes," she said, embracing him warmly. "Welcome home. I heard about this situation at home. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing. I wanted to discuss the children's stability during this difficult time." For the next hour, Heath painted a careful picture, a devoted father trying to protect his children from an increasingly unstable home environment. He provided documentation of Tanya's affair, Kurt's involvement with the children, the legal proceedings that could uproot Emma and Justin from their schools, their friends, their community. "My greatest concern," Heath said, "is that the children are being used as pawns in adult conflicts they don't understand. I want to ensure their best interests are protected." Mrs. Dixon nodded gravely. "What are you requesting?" "Monitoring. Documentation. If anyone tries to remove my children from the school district, for any reason, I want to be notified immediately." That afternoon, Kurt Russell sat in his empty office, staring at foreclosure notices, investigation letters, and legal documents that would take months to resolve, if they could be resolved at all. His phone had stopped ringing because there was no one left to call. His lawyer was under investigation. His business partners were distancing themselves. His credit was destroyed. He thought about running, disappearing, starting over somewhere else. Then he thought about Heath Barnes' cold eyes and realized running wouldn't help. This wasn't random bad luck or coincidental investigations. This was targeted, systematic destruction by someone who understood exactly how to dismantle a life without leaving fingerprints. Kurt picked up his phone and dialed the only number that mattered. "Tanya? We need to talk. Now." But when Tanya answered, her voice was hollow with defeat. "It's over, Kurt. Everything's falling apart. He knows. He's known all along. Then we fight back. We hire better lawyers, With what money? My bank accounts are frozen pending investigation. You're broke. Bailey's practice is shut down." Tanya's laugh was bitter. "He didn't just beat us. He erased us." Kurt stared out his office window at the city where he'd built his reputation, his wealth, his future. All of it gone because he'd underestimated a soldier's capacity for strategic warfare. "What do we do now?" "Now." Tanya's voice was barely a whisper. "Now we face the consequences." Chapter 8. The Price of Betrayal. Heath Barnes stood in the kitchen of his home, making coffee at 6 a.m. while reviewing the final phase of his campaign. Emma and Justin were still asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their mother had spent the previous night at a hotel because the house was now considered a potential crime scene, pending investigation into financial irregularities. The investigation was legitimate. Someone had reported concerns about assets being hidden during divorce proceedings, community property being misappropriated, and potential fraud involving joint accounts. All concerns that required official review, all triggered by anonymous tips backed by irrefutable documentation. Tanya's life was unraveling with the same methodical precision Heath had once applied to enemy targets. Her nursing license was under review for ethics violations. Her credit was destroyed by the financial investigation. Her reputation in the community, built over 15 years of marriage to a respected military veteran, was being systematically dismantled by her own documented choices. But Heath wasn't finished. His phone buzzed with a text from Douglas Schaefer. Package delivered. Heath smiled, remembering Kurt Russell's arrogance, his assumption that a deployed soldier posed no threat to his comfortable civilian life. Kurt was about to learn exactly how naive that assumption had been. Across town, Kurt Russell sat in his luxury condo, staring at legal documents that had been delivered at dawn. A civil lawsuit filed by 3 different clients, claiming he defrauded them on construction projects. Each lawsuit backed by evidence Kurt couldn't deny, because the evidence was real. Heath's team hadn't manufactured crimes. They'd simply ensured that Kurt's existing corners cutting, his casual disregard for building codes, his pattern of promising more than he delivered, all received simultaneous professional scrutiny. Kurt's phone rang. His insurance company. Mr. Russell, we're calling to inform you that your professional liability coverage is being canceled effective immediately. The number of claims filed against you exceeds our risk tolerance. You can't just cancel. Actually, sir, we can. It's in your contract. Section 14 covers situations involving criminal investigation or professional misconduct allegations. Kurt hung up and immediately dialed his accountant, only to discover that his business accounts had been frozen pending the fraud investigation. His assets were locked, his credit destroyed, his professional reputation in ruins. But the cruelest blow came in the afternoon, when his phone rang with a call from Emma Barnes. Kurt. Her voice was small, confused. My dad said you've been lying to us. About Mom, about the divorce, about why he had to go away. Is that true? Kurt closed his eyes, understanding that this was Heath's masterstroke, not just destroying Kurt's life, but ensuring his children understood exactly who was responsible for their family's destruction. Emma, sweetheart, it's complicated. Dad showed us pictures of you and Mom at restaurants holding hands. He said you were trying to steal us away from him. Emma's voice broke. He said you wanted to take us to California so he'd never see us again. That's not. We weren't trying to. Kurt struggled for words that might salvage something, anything. I care about you and Justin. I was just trying to help. By lying? By sneaking around? By making Mom lie to us about Dad? Kurt realized he had no answer that wouldn't make things worse. Heath had positioned this perfectly. Kurt wasn't just the man who'd broken up their family. He was the man who deceived them, manipulated them, used them as weapons against their own father. Emma, I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But we did get hurt. Mom's crying all the time now. Dad looks angry and sad. And Justin won't even talk to you anymore. Emma's voice hardened with a maturity beyond her 15 years. Dad says people who betray families don't get second chances. The line went dead. That evening, Tanya sat across from Heath in a restaurant where they'd celebrated their 5th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, returning to the scene of happier times to negotiate the terms of their divorce. You destroyed him, Tanya said, her voice hollow. No, Heath replied calmly. I exposed him. Kurt Russell destroyed himself through choices he made. I simply ensured those choices had appropriate consequences. His business is gone. His reputation is ruined. The police are investigating him for fraud. All legitimate investigations based on his actual conduct. I didn't fabricate evidence, Tanya. I just made sure existing evidence was properly reviewed. Tanya stared at her untouched coffee. And me? What did I do to deserve having my life dismantled? Heath leaned forward slightly. You filed for divorce while I was deployed. You claimed my service to this country constituted abandonment of our children. You introduced another man into their lives without my knowledge or consent. You planned to move them across the country to prevent me from maintaining a relationship with them. His voice remained steady, professional. What exactly did you think would happen? I thought you'd fight it in court like a normal person. Normal people don't have their families attacked while they're serving overseas. Heath's eyes were ice cold. You chose to go to war with someone who's exceptionally good at warfare. These are the results. Tanya looked up at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man she'd married. Not the absent husband she'd convinced herself he'd become, but the strategic, unforgiving, utterly competent soldier who'd earned respect through strength and fear through necessity. What happens now? Heath slid a folder across the table. Divorce agreement. You sign it, this ends. You fight it, this continues. Tanya opened the folder, scanning terms that were harsh but not vindictive. She would receive the house, spousal support, and shared custody, but only if she remained in Colorado, agreed to all travel restrictions regarding the children, and submitted to regular evaluations to ensure their stability. And Kurt Russell is no longer your concern. As of today, if you have any contact with him, any contact at all, the agreement is void and the investigations continue. Heath's expression was granite. He played games with my family. Now he gets to live with the consequences for the rest of his life. Tanya stared at the papers, understanding that she was reading her surrender terms. You'll never forgive me, will you? No, Heath said simply. I don't forgive betrayal. I don't forget when someone tries to steal my children. And I don't give second chances to people who mistake my absence for weakness. Tanya signed the papers with shaking hands, officially ending 15 years of marriage and any hope of redemption. As they left the restaurant, Heath felt no satisfaction, no victory, only the cold completion of a necessary mission. He'd protected his children, secured his relationship with them, and ensured that those who betrayed him understood the permanent consequences of their choices. The war was over. Heath Barnes had won, but winning, he realized, felt nothing like he'd expected. Chapter 9. No Forgiveness. 6 months later, Heath Barnes sat in the bleachers watching Emma's soccer game, surrounded by other parents who treated him with the respectful distance reserved for local legends. The story of his return, the swift destruction of his wife's affair, and the methodical dismantling of Kurt Russell's life had become community folklore, a cautionary tale about the dangers of crossing certain lines. Emma scored the winning goal and looked directly at Heath in the stands, her smile radiant with the confidence of a child who knew her father would always be there when it mattered. Justin sat beside Heath, no longer the angry teenager who'd resented the deployment, but a young man who'd learned hard lessons about loyalty, consequences, and the price of betrayal. After the game, Emma ran to Heath with grass stains on her uniform and victory in her eyes. "Did you see that goal, Dad?" "I saw it. Perfect form, excellent positioning." Heath hugged his daughter, marveling at how quickly children could recover from trauma when the adults in their lives provided stability and truth. "Can we get ice cream?" "Please." "Of course. Justin, you coming?" His son nodded, but Heath noticed the way Justin's eyes scanned the parking lot, looking for threats, evaluating faces, unconsciously mimicking the hypervigilance Heath had taught him through example. The boy had learned that the world contained predators, but also that some people were worth following into battle. As they walked toward Heath's truck, a familiar voice called out behind them. "Heath, can we talk?" He turned to see Tanya approaching, wearing scrubs from her new job at a clinic across town, the only medical facility willing to hire her after the nursing board investigation. She looked older, worn down by months of consequences and social isolation. "Mom!" Emma started toward her, but Heath's gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her. "Emma, Justin, get in the truck. I'll be right there." His children obeyed without question, understanding the dynamics that now governed their family. They loved their mother, but they respected their father's authority to manage interactions with people who'd proven untrustworthy. "How are you holding up?" Heath asked, his tone neutral but not unkind. Tanya wrapped her arms around herself, looking fragile in a way that once would have triggered Heath's protective instincts. "I'm surviving. The job pays enough to cover my apartment, therapy bills. I'm managing. Good. The children need stability." About that, Tanya glanced toward the truck where Emma and Justin waited. "Emma's birthday is next week. I was hoping we could celebrate together. As a family." Heath studied his ex-wife's face, seeing hope and desperation in equal measure. "We're not a family anymore, Tanya. You made that choice. I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Heath's voice carried a hint of the cold fury that had driven his campaign of destruction. "You didn't make mistakes. You made calculated decisions to betray your marriage, manipulate your children, and destroy their relationship with their father. Those weren't mistakes, they were choices." Tanya's composure cracked. "I know what I did was wrong, but we have children together. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you'll always be their mother. It means I'll always ensure they have access to you because they need that relationship. But it doesn't mean I forgive you, and it doesn't mean we rebuild what you destroyed. People change, Heath. I've learned." "Have you?" Heath's interruption was sharp. "Because 3 weeks ago, you called Kurt Russell. Twice." Tanya's face went white. "How did you?" "I told you that any contact with him would void our agreement." "I meant it." Heath's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You want to know why I'll never forgive you? Because even after everything that happened, even after seeing what your choices cost our children, you still reached out to the man who tried to steal them from me. It wasn't like that. He called me, crying, talking about losing everything. I felt sorry for him. You felt sorry for him." Heath's laugh was devoid of humor. "The man who planned to move my children across the country, who helped you lie to them about their father, who tried to erase me from their lives. And you felt sorry for him. Tanya realized she'd made another catastrophic error in judgment. Heath, please. The agreement stands because the children need consistency. But you and I are done having conversations about second chances. You've proven you can't be trusted to maintain boundaries, to prioritize your children's well-being over your own emotions. Heath turned to walk away, then paused. Emma's birthday party is Saturday at 2. You can attend for 2 hours supervised. Justin's science fair is Thursday evening. You can come for 1 hour. Those are the limits of your involvement in family events. That's not enough. It's exactly what you earned. Heath faced her fully, his expression final. You want more access to your children? Prove over the next year that you can follow rules, maintain boundaries, and put their needs ahead of your own. But understand this. I will never trust you again. I will never forgive what you tried to do to my family. And if you ever put my children at risk again, the consequences will make the last 6 months look like a gentle warning. As Heath drove away with his children, Emma chattering about ice cream flavors, and Justin quietly processing the interaction he'd witnessed, he felt the settled calm of a mission completed successfully. Tanya Barnes stood alone in the parking lot, watching the taillights of the truck that carried the family she'd destroyed through her own choices. Around her, other parents gathered their children, loaded gear, made plans for family dinners and homework help, and all the ordinary moments that created extraordinary bonds. She'd traded all of that for 6 months with a man who'd disappear at the first sign of real consequences. Kurt Russell had moved to another state, changed his name, started over with nothing. He'd abandoned her as quickly as he'd pursued her, proving that his promises of forever had been as empty as his business deals. Meanwhile, Heath Barnes drove home with his children, planning Emma's birthday party, helping Justin with his science project, rebuilding the family foundation that Tanya's choices had shattered. His children respected him not just as their father, but as a man who kept his word, protected what mattered, and never compromised on principles. Heath Barnes was many things: soldier, strategist, father, protector. But he was not, and would never be, a man who gave second chances to people who betrayed the sacred trust of family. Some lines, once crossed, erased the possibility of redemption forever. And Heath Barnes was perfectly content with that truth. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.